Tonight on the 10, it's the Wolves versus Wall Street.
The financial fight over GameStop dominating headlines.
It's like the hunters become the hunted.
How rogue Redditors are doing battle with big-time hedge funds and winning.
We're cutting through the confusion to look at all the money made and the billions of dollars lost.
And at some point, the music's going to stop, and you're going to have people that are left without a chair.
And how all of it could affect you. The 10 on NECN starts now.
I'll admit I occasionally make a bet here or there, but gambling for some people is a full-time job. And we're not just talking about betting on the Celtics or a Patriots game here or there.
Yeah, especially over the last year when many sports were canceled or delayed. People were looking for new ways to try to cash in, and apparently they've gone to Wall Street.
It's become more of a betting market.
And one big bet has paid off for many average Joe investors and has some hedge funds on their heels, Tim.
Yeah, billion-dollar investment firms losing big money this week in a classic David versus Goliath fight all over a struggling retailer. We're talking about GameStop.
Yes.
And that's our starting point tonight.
So let's start with why GameStop and what is it? How did it end up in the middle of this mess?
Yeah, you've probably seen it in a mall, maybe a strip mall. That's usually where I've seen it. Sells video games, and like most stores that sell products in person, it's been a rough last year or so in the pandemic, 12 months or so. They've actually closed hundreds of their stores since 2019. But last year, it actually caught the eye of a lot of big firms on Wall Street who believed that GameStop was essentially doomed. So those professional investors with deep pockets started short selling. Now, normally you think of investing as buying low and then selling high. Well, short selling, kind of the opposite of that. It's somewhat complicated, right? It involves borrowing, selling, buying back. In the simplest terms, if you are short selling, you're betting that a company will fail and that the stock will go down. But the key to making the money off of that kind of investment is that stock has to drop. Now, big money investors were short selling GameStop for some time, billions of dollars worth of investments in GameStop. Even for the pros, this is a risky move because you're rooting for and banking on those businesses failing. So really, any kind of positive news for the company or public rallying that pushes that stock up at all, well, the hedge funds' potential profits, they not only disappear, but then they start to lose billions of dollars, the money they invested in the first place. And that's what happened with GameStop. A bunch of people online started spreading positive chatter about it, and average Joe investors started buying stock. Enough people did it, it drove up the price. Check that out. This is just the last week alone. It nearly doubled, tripled, quadrupled just in the last couple of days. And that put these big hedge funds in a corner, right? It created what's known as a short squeeze. Really, the only way to salvage their already losing bet was to buy more stock. And guess what? That only drove up the price even more. Here's Chuck Zada of Securities America to explain why even though the underdog won this battle, they might not win the war.
This is a generation that rightly, I think, views Wall Street as having kind of played by a different set of rules for a while and is trying to fight back. They're certainly, again, they're winning this battle here. But the important thing to remember, hey, the rules always change. There's always adaptations. And the people you're playing against adapt as well. And hedge funds don't really take kindly to folks coming in and making them not look so great.
And you may be wondering at this point, is this even legal? Well, the answer is yes, it is legal for the Reddit investors to do this, and it's legal for hedge funds to engage in these short sales. And while this Reddit revolution found a weak spot in the hedge fund plan, do not count out this industry because the people who run hedge funds, well, they are very shrewd investors working with billions of dollars, so they can absorb a lot of risk. And as BU professor Dirk Hackbarth pointed out, these short sales can be useful, like informing the market when a stock is overvalued.
So it's absolutely something that could be essential for finding the true value of a company.
I've not gone head to head, but you can imagine it's tough to compete with a hedge fund pumping $1 billion into an investment. Nearly impossible to do it alone. And in this case, it actually took countless people to even make a dent. When a Goliath like a hedge fund invests $1 billion into something, your $1,000 investment or so is not going to really turn the tide. The numbers just aren't there for David to take down Goliath. But that's where the online community comes in. Instead of one David investing $1,000, imagine 1 million Davids, each investing $1,000 of their own. Suddenly, that's a lot of stones to topple the giant because now there's $1 billion on both sides. And this large group of Davids against that one Goliath is now a seemingly fair fight.
Yeah, now those Davids can finally buy more clothes, right? And the Davids apparently can do this because they're winning, or at least a lot of them are. The surge in GameStop's stock prices caused big hedge funds to lose more than $14 billion. Whew, it's a lot of money. Professor Hackbarth says that it shows the frustration of the average Americans being locked out of these lucrative deals, all because the elite.
It's almost a bit the anger of the crowd because the small investor is trying to fight back against the advanced, hedge funds, and they're actually winning this one. They're winning. They're succeeding in forcing some of these institutional investors to close their shorts.
So you still with us? We know it's been kind of confusing. We were talking about it earlier, and we were like, how can we even tell this story? It's so confusing.
Yeah, like I can't afford a yacht, but me and 5,000 of my closest friends could probably barely afford a yacht. Similar there. Let's talk about something we do know a little bit more about, Reddit and its role in all of this, because it did play a big role. Online chatter about support over GameStop, that's been happening for years now, but things really changed recently. As the price of these shares rose, more and more Reddit users jumped on board, posting more and more about investing in GameStop. It may sound crazy, but all these average people doing their small parts, maybe $1,000 at a time, started to really make big waves on Wall Street.
Yeah, Tim, and it wasn't just vocal support for GameStop in those Reddit boards that resulted in this short squeeze. Other companies on the list include AMC Theaters, and in the past, they've done this with Bed Bath & Beyond, BlackBerry. Even at one point, Blockbuster had this happen to them back in the day, so it's not something new. But if you notice the trend, these were all companies who were struggling. So what made this situation different and also newsworthy? Well, technology has definitely made it easier for people to get into the stock market. Just like they were able to coordinate and talk on Reddit, the brokerage app Robinhood has helped people become investors with no fees and the ability to trade small sums. It's letting the average Joe trade straight from their phone. And with that ease, a lot of people are coming in to play this game with hopes of big profits.
And Robinhood, the name alone, you might think, well, this makes sense. This is the poor stealing from the rich. Well, maybe Robinhood has turned into the Sheriff of Nottingham because they took a controversial action just today. No more buying up shares of GameStop. Robinhood right now only allowing their users to sell off their shares in GameStop and those other companies whose stocks have been driven up, the ones that Jackie was just talking about. David was finally beating Goliath after all this, and somebody came in to stop the fight. There was, of course, not surprisingly here, a quick wave of outrage online saying that the company, Robinhood, was violating the rights of their retail investors. And then the fight got political. And this truly is wild because as divided as Washington has been, as this country has been in the last several years, there was actually agreement. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle jumped in, and everyone essentially bashed Robinhood's move here. Take Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She posted this on Twitter yesterday, calling the move unacceptable. And then Senator Ted Cruz, that Ted Cruz, who is essentially her polar opposite as far as politics go, retweeted her, AOC, and saying he agrees. Even he's calling for investigations into this.
Yeah, a surprising pair there. A new development today as well. At least one Robinhood user has filed a class action lawsuit against the app's decision to restrict trading on its app. The lawsuit claims Robinhood removed the GameStop option in an effort to knowingly manipulate the market. It also accuses the app of breaching its contract of failing to disclose that it was going to randomly pull the stock from its platform.
So Robinhood today released a statement about all this, saying it was a temporary decision and that they made that decision and, quote, starting tomorrow, we plan to allow limited buys of these securities. We'll continue to monitor the situation and may make adjustments as needed. Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. You got to wonder if they had felt some pressure there to, make some changes. So we, of course, asked our professor about all of this. He was kind of schooling us in all of this today. And he said this risky trading can make the stock market especially volatile.
We wanted to know whether or not that would warrant regulations from Washington.
Excess volatility is definitely a rationale for regulation. And I can see that we might have to rethink position limits.
So the other piece to all this, too, is if you're not one of those people in a hedge fund, I don't know anyone in a hedge fund, or one of those small-time investors that got on through the Reddit and Robinhood, is there any bigger downside to all of this?
Yeah, and the question I wanted to know, could this really impact any of us, especially people like all of us that have 401ks, or maybe you have a college fund with a mutual fund, or maybe you do own a few stocks?
I think absolutely that could be a concern, and this is why the SEC and other regulatory bodies have to carefully look into the data. I think it's quite clear to me, without having even all this data, that what happened yesterday in the S&P 500, which is what we all have in our retirement accounts, was excess volatility induced by hedge funds having to find the cash to close their shorts.
So we know no stock can go up forever. Eventually, things are going to come down.
Yeah, so what do the futures hold? Haha, like that little play on words. And who really is going to come out on top?
Because you never know when it ends. It's like a avalanche, or like a good wave to ride. But like every wave on the ocean, it ends at some point. Someone in the end has to hold the bag, and this never has a happy ending.
We know the hedge funds have lost an awful lot of money. Also important to note, not everyone who invested in GameStop made out like a bandit.
Yeah.
If you got into the game late, you might not have made money at all.
Yeah, you could have lost a lot of money too. So that's how volatile this is. And that's why we really want to also say, you know, if you're playing on Robinhood, it's important not to invest more than you can afford to lose.
Yeah, and it's also important to note that this doesn't happen that often. So seeing the little guy, the Davids in this case, taking on the Goliaths, is relatively good to see. And while you have politicians on both sides of the aisle saying, hey, this is the opportunity for the people to kind of get in the game when it comes to Wall Street.